Yeah, I'd like to pick up on a couple of the aspects here Professor Ford brought up about the Antichrist and notions of orthodoxy, notions of we're right, you're wrong. And as the 16th century unfolds, particularly into the second half of the 16th century, we enter a period when increasingly different Christian groups are writing more and more confessions or statements of their own belief. And in the process, what historians have called this process of confessionalization means that a lot of these doctrinal borders start to harden. We have an increasingly firmly defined Lutheran church, particularly by 1580 in the Book of Concord. We have increasingly defined Protestant groups in England, in Scotland, in the Swiss cantons, and elsewhere. We also have an increasingly well-defined, or defined in any way, post-Tridentine Catholic Church as well. Now these confessional statements, whether it's in English or in German or Latin or otherwise, oftentimes these confessional statements would include the word credamus, we believe, right? We believe this, we believe that. These are positive statements, we might say. But oftentimes these confessional statements also included the word condemnamus, we condemn, right? So there's an implicit, or rather an explicit, negative element going on here as well. And the definition by opposition, to some extent, in theological terms, then could have very significant effects in the social context and then in the political context. And here we're entering increasingly wars of religion and wars of religious ideology. Okay? Now, how do we think about the wars of religion or differences of religious ideology in the 21st century? Do these things still matter today? What challenges do religious ideologies of the 16th century, what challenges do they pose today? Now, Professor Ford broached the question, does it still matter? Can historians end the Reformation? This is a question that has been brought up recently at a 16th century studies conference. Well, I would say that, at least in my own country, in the United States, since September 11th, 2001, religious ideologies have been inflamed in a way that they hadn't been previously. There had always been religious differences before 2001, but since 2001, in a political context and in a polemical context, divisions across the Abrahamic religions, I think, are stronger maybe than they have been in quite some time. We have particularly vitriolic and vociferous Christian groups condemning different Islamic groups and so on and so forth. And oftentimes this goes back the other way as well. And oftentimes these condemnations happen without a full recognition or a knowledge of whom they're condemning, or the variety of Islam, the variety of Christian teachings, and so on and so forth. Now, what can we learn from the 16th century that might help us in some capacity here in the 21st century? Well, I think that one might not necessarily only need to look at the stark definitions, the boundaries of the confessions as be-all, end-all boundaries, but rather look towards maybe the more ecumenical voices. Look more perhaps towards those who were teaching ethical Christianity rather than rigid doctrines of Christianity. And I have in mind here a gentleman by the name of John Dury in the 17th century, a well-known ecumenist, a well-known ethical teacher of Christianity, who emphasized that Christian groups, Protestant, Catholic, or otherwise, should emphasize their commonalities on the fundamentals of Christianity and cast aside the differences of detail that divided Christian groups. This was a person, Dury, who had wide international contacts, and tried to see things in as cosmopolitan a view as possible. So putting aside what he might say were parochial concerns of detail in theology, but rather looking at a broad context of what the different Christian groups may have had in common. So thinking about the challenges of the Reformation, what they pose today, and how the Reformation still matters, I'd say that on the one hand, yes, we do have very, very strong differences of opinion and very strong confessional divides in the 21st century, just as there were in the 16th. But we also do have other voices in the Reformation, those who are looking to overcome these divides and emphasize the humanity we all share. Thank you.